He was called a hero. France celebrated him. The king rewarded him. Children looked up to him. He fought beside Joan of Arc, one of history's most sacred figures, and won battles that saved a nation. But the same man who protected thousands was hunting children in the dark, not one, not 10, possibly hundreds, and for years nobody looked, because nobody believed a man who decorated could be capable of that. That's exactly what made him so dangerous. Gilles de Rais was born in 1404 into one of the wealthiest families in France. Not just rich, generational wealth, castles, land, titles, the kind of power most people couldn't imagine existing in a single family. By the time he was a teenager, he had inherited everything, and he had the intelligence to use it. He trained as a knight. He was disciplined, strategic, and physically imposing. By his early 20s, he was already commanding troops in the 100 Years' War, one of the bloodiest, most exhausting conflicts in European history. And then came Joan of Arc. Gilles fought alongside her. He was her protector on the battlefield. When she led charges, he was beside her. When France was on the verge of collapse, these two, a peasant girl with a divine mission and a nobleman with a sword, helped turn the tide. After Joan was captured and burned, Gilles mourned. He left the military. He returned to his estates. In 1429, King Charles VII of France named him Marshal of France, the highest military honor the country could give. He was 25 years old. From the outside, this was a man who had everything: honor, wealth, legacy, a permanent place in French history. But something was happening behind the walls of his castles, something that wouldn't surface for years. And when it did, it didn't just destroy him. It made people question how well they ever really knew him. After the war, Gilles retreated to his estates, and that's when the spending began. He threw banquets that lasted days. He funded theater productions about his own military campaigns. He kept a personal choir of 30 singers. He built a private chapel and staffed it with priests, choir boys, and musicians, all on his personal payroll. The money was bleeding out fast. Within a few years, his family went to court to legally block him from selling more land. He was burning through a fortune so large it seemed impossible to destroy. And he was destroying it. But the spending wasn't the darkest part. The children in the villages near his castles started disappearing. At first, people assumed they had wandered off. Rural France in the 1430s was dangerous. Disease, poverty, bandits. There were plenty of explanations, but the disappearances kept happening. Always near his land, always young boys. Parents noticed, whispers spread. But Gilles was a Marshal of France, a war hero, a man with direct connections to the crown. Who were they supposed to tell? Who would believe them? So the disappearances continued. Inside his castles, Gilles had surrounded himself with a small inner circle, men who procured children for him under the cover of offering them work or education. Families handed their children over, trusting the name, the title, the reputation. That trust was the weapon, and it worked for years, until one decision, one act of arrogance, finally cracked the walls open. In 1440, Gilles made a mistake. A dispute over property led him to storm a church in Brittany and physically assault a priest during a religious ceremony. In front of witnesses. That was the crack. The church had grounds to act now, and they moved fast. An investigation was opened, not into the disappearances at first, but into the church incident. But once investigators started pulling at threads, other things came loose. Witnesses came forward, servants talked. Members of his inner circle, facing their own charges, gave detailed testimony about what happened inside the castle walls. The trial began in October 1440. What came out was beyond anything the court expected. Over the course of the proceedings, testimony described years of abduction, torture, and murder of children, mostly young boys, carried out inside Gilles' own estates. The numbers given by witnesses ranged from 80 to over 200 victims. Gilles initially denied everything. He was aggressive, dismissive, and treated the court with contempt, like a man who still believed his title protected him. It didn't. Faced with the full weight of testimony and evidence, he broke. He confessed. in detail, in front of the court, the clergy, and the public. The man who had stood beside Joan of Arc, France's most beloved martyr, was now confessing to crimes that left the courtroom in silence. On October 26, 1440, Gilles de Rais was sentenced to death. The hero was gone. What stood in his place was something nobody had a word for yet. Gilles de Rais was hanged on October 26, 1440. He died the same day he was sentenced. The church granted him the last rites. Some accounts say the crowd that gathered showed sympathy, moved by his confession, his apparent remorse. That detail is worth sitting with, because here was a man who, by testimony, had murdered children for years, and people still found a way to feel something for him, his title, his history, his tears in the courtroom. That's not unique to medieval France. That's a pattern. We have always struggled to reconcile what someone has done with who we believed them to be. The longer the admiration, the harder the fall, and sometimes the harder we resist accepting the fall at all. Gilles de Rais wasn't a monster who appeared from nowhere. He was built by power, insulated by status, and protected by a world that didn't want to look too closely at the men it had chosen to celebrate. The children who disappeared near his estates never got monuments. Their names were never recorded. He got a trial, a confession, last rites, and centuries of historical debate about whether he was even guilty. That imbalance is the real story. Power doesn't just enable harm. It shapes what we remember, who we mourn, and who we forget. That was true in 1440. It's still true now.